I'll let them come back on at the end. Okay, so now it's not letting me. It is not letting me move. So what is going on with this? Hold on one second. Okay. All right. So I wanted to read something to you. It comes from a book, and you may want to consider getting this book. It's Healing After Loss, and some of you may already have this book, Daily Meditations for Working Through Grief. And so today is June 17th, so I'm going to start with reading something from the meditation today. And it talks about when we are bogged down in heavy grief, can we believe such a day will ever come? A person recovering from a serious illness said, it's almost worth having been sick because I appreciate all over again how wonderful it is to be well. It doesn't happen for a while, but if we are blessed with good friends and a faith that can help us through the bad times, then a time will come when we awaken to the beauty of life around us as to a new June morning, to a world of incredible beauty and promise. If you can't feel this way yet, stay with your grief, but keep the promise in mind that one day, having survived the worst, you will encounter the best, and probably with new appreciation because of what you have been through. And it says, I will hold before myself the promise of a renewed and joyful life. And so Ms. Hickman talked about this today. And so I certainly wanted to share with you that those of us who may be experiencing grief, our clients may be experiencing grief, our parishioners may have experiencing grief, but at some point, we will encounter the best things in life. So I want you to just kind of reflect a little bit on some of these questions. Some of these questions I posted as part of the webinar for today, but just reflect just a little bit. Reflect just a little bit. Take some time to reflect on these questions. What stands in my way of grieving? What makes grieving so hard? Why does it seem to be unnatural to grieve my losses? What contributes to putting my emotions on hold? Who says I have to be strong? When can I release my vulnerabilities? So I really want you to think about that. I really want you to kind of hone in on those particular questions, because it's very important for us as people, as a society, to really begin to think about those questions and make those questions very personal. And it's not necessarily our clients or our parishioners, how they're grieving. But at the end of the day, we have to be very honest about what is standing in our way of grieving. Why does it seem to be so hard? Why, as a society, as people, we put our emotions on hold? Who says we have to be strong? And when can I begin to release my vulnerabilities? So when we get to a break, I'll give people a chance to talk about those particular questions. I'll take a couple of questions live, and then there's some questions that may be in the chat box. And so I'll give you an opportunity to really hone in and maybe write some of these questions down, because these are some questions that you could particularly ask your clients. You may be able to ask your parishioners, because we want to make grieving and we want to make this process and this journey very, very personal for what we're dealing with and going through. So I want you to look in the chat box, and I want you to think about the questions that I'm posing to you, or the statements that I'm posing to you. Anger is a normal response to loss. Is that a yes or no? And you can type your answer in the chat box. Anger is a normal response to loss. And I'll talk a little bit about anger and some of the reasons why people don't express their anger or don't have outlets to be angry when they are grieving. So that's the first one. The next one is everyone grieves differently. Is that a yes or is that a no? Everyone grieves differently. Okay. The next statement is all losses are the same. All losses are the same. Is that a yes or is that a no? Okay. Now give everybody a chance to do that. And if you don't want to submit it in a chat box, we'll give you a chance to talk about that. So when we think about grief, what is grief? And grief is sometimes hard to define. So I got a definition of grief. Grief is deep or intense sorrow or distress, especially at the death of someone. As you can see the definition, it is something that causes keen distress or suffering as a response to a loss. So as you can see, grief is something we experience. It's deep. It's sometimes hit at the core of our soul. It's intense sorrow or distress. And it talks about grief being something that happens, especially at the death of someone. So I would say to you, grief is not necessarily happening as a result of death. We can grieve losses when people are still living. We can grieve non-death losses. Besides death losses, there are non-death losses that people do grieve. So it's that intense sorrow, it's that distress, when we experience something that we've lost. So that's the definition of grief, that deep hitting to the core of our being, of our soul, when we experience losses in our lives. So when we think about grief, one of the things about grief is that it's a continuing process. It changes over time. So my husband was in the military and he was in Germany, and he was telling me, he said when he was in the military in Germany, you can experience a variety of seasons in one given day. It can be warm it can be autumn, and then it can be winter, then it can be spring, and it can be summer. That's how grief is. It's a continuing process. It changes over time. If a person has experienced a loss, today they may be happy, the next hour they may be sad, the next minute they may be disappointed, the next hour they may be feeling lost. So grief is a continuing process with many changes. It changes over time. It doesn't stay the same. Today I may have accepted that loss, but tomorrow it may look very, very different for me. And if anyone have ever been to the beach and you see how the waves come and go, the waves go out, they come in. That's how grief is. Grief come and go. It goes out, but it comes back in. And some people think, I feel better today. But you may be feeling better today, quote unquote, or it may not be as intense. But at the end of the day, later on down the road, something may come up that may cause you to feel a certain way. I had a young lady say to me many years ago, her husband had died and he had been deceased for 10 years. One day, it was around Christmas time. She went into a store and she was picking up a Christmas tree. And she started to just cry. And it had been 10 years since her husband had passed away. And so those are the many changes that happen with grief. One minute you may be feeling good, and then the next minute you may hear a song, you may see something, you may smell something, and you may experience those emotions all over again. Grief is a normal and natural reaction to loss. It is normal. It's natural. And I don't mean to be graphic, but grief is a normal and natural reaction. It's just like going to the bathroom. We go to the bathroom on a daily basis. Grief is the same way. But what we do, we make grief out of something that's spooky, something that needs to be diagnosed, something that, is destructive at times. But grief is normal. It's a normal reaction to what we experience, especially when we're going through a variety of losses in our lives. Grief is individualized and it's unique to that particular person. So somebody might say, well, you're a widow, so then you know what a widow may be experiencing. Well, you are a widower, so you know what that man may be experiencing because he lost his wife. No, it's individualized. It's unique to the person who's going through it. Because I've experienced many losses in my life, I'm not going to grieve the way you grieve. It's going to be very, very different. And so we want to make sure that when people are grieving, it's individualized to the uniqueness of that person who's going through it. And as you can see, grief is a reaction to the experience of many losses, and it's not just death. There are non-death losses that we experience on a daily basis. So as you can see, the nature of grief. Grief is different from everyone. And it tends to be different from everyone because it depends on the various support systems that people may have in place. And it's different for everyone because of the fact that they may not have the support systems, or the support systems that may be there or they think may be there are not the support systems that will be there. So for instance, there was times when I was working with some of my clients in hospice, and they would say, well, I reached out to my friend and she didn't even answer the phone. At times, the people you feel that may be there for that person, or even for you, may not be the support systems that's going to continue to walk with you and going to continue to walk the journey with you. And when we think about grief, it is a journey. No one has a monopoly on grief. The person who is experiencing grief are the expert in their own process. They're the expert in their own journey. So thinking about support systems, sometimes support system will vary. Sometimes we feel like, yes, my church is going to be there. My temple is going to be there. You know, I know my priest is going to be there, but sometimes that's not always the case. And then there are people who you may think who's never going to be there, who would never walk that journey with you, may be the very support systems that you need in your life. Resources are not always known or available. A lot of times when I was working in hospice, a lot of the community didn't know that we were offering counseling services. They didn't know that, you know, we offered, you know, grief counseling to the community as a whole. And people only thought that we were offering services to those who rendered our services, but it wasn't true. But it also goes back to resources not being known. People don't know what's available. A lot of times people don't research. Sometimes, you know, they feel like, well, I can't be a part of that because my husband didn't die in hospice. My husband died as a result of a car accident. My child was murdered on the street. So sometimes people don't always know that these resources are available. And sometimes people are very, very cautious about sharing their vulnerabilities with a stranger. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. Everyone has different coping styles. So one of the things we definitely want to do is to help people have healthy coping styles. I've seen people who have gone through grief and they tend to familiarize themselves with what they know to do. For instance, I know growing up, when people died in my family, the first thing they would start doing, everybody's at the funeral. And the first thing they would start doing, well, the funeral is over. I got to go get a drink. I can't deal with this. I can't handle this. So one of the things, you know, as a clinician, as a practitioner, as a clergy person, or in the faith community, is helping people come up with healthy ways of coping with their grief. People tend to be self-destructive when it comes to grief because they feel like if I take that next drink, or if I do that line of Coke, that's going to help me get through what I'm experiencing, but not realizing that next drink is not going to help them, because at the end of the day, when they wake up the next day or the next hour, that loss is still going to be there. There are gender differences. Men grieve very differently from women. And sometimes this is the reason why this happens. And it's a societal thing. It's what we grow up with. It's a generational thing. Because remember, think about growing up. Think about what your family may have said to you. Like, I've seen boys, you know, and I used to work with young men. And so they would say to me, well, Miss Lisa, you know, my family said, you know, I'm a man. I have to be strong. So growing up, if a boy is on a bike and he's rolling down the hill and all of a sudden he falls off the bike and he starts to cry, the first thing the parent would say, or the first thing the adult would say, no, don't cry. Suck it up. You know, you got to be strong. You got to be strong. You know, we don't cry. Boys don't cry. And so fast forward to adulthood, men and sometimes women, because sometimes depending on where you come from, you're taught to be strong. You're taught, nah, we can't express our emotions. You know, people don't need to see your weakness. You know, you need to just get over it and deal with it. And so fast forward to adulthood, people don't know what to do with what they're experiencing. They don't know how to grieve in a healthy way. They don't understand sometimes that I can cry. I can be vulnerable. I can take the mask off. I don't have to walk around thinking that I have everything all together or I have everything in control. I can do this and it's okay. At the end of the day, what we have to do as parishioners, or what we have to do as lay people, clinicians, sometimes we have to give people permission to grieve. So sometimes I would have to tell my client, well, I've had clients say to me, well, my family, I've always been the strong one. So my family has never been accustomed to seeing me in a weak state. So sometimes I would have to say to my clients, I'm giving you permission. If no one else have given you permission to cry and to grieve, I'm giving you permission to do that. Also, grief reflects our culture and our religious differences. In some cultures, as I was just explaining, some cultures teach us that it's not good to cry. Some cultures teach us it's not good to show our weaknesses. And so, again, we walk around with masks. We walk around, we go into church, and people say, well, how you doing today? Oh, I'm okay. Everything is good. But deep down inside, we are hurting. We're in pain, and we don't want to share that because we don't want people sometimes to think that we're weak. Individuals may be experiencing multiple losses, so not just a death loss, but in the process of going through a death loss, there may be other losses that's simultaneously going on at the same time. So I've had clients that said, well, my husband died and he didn't leave any insurance money. So I don't know how I'm going to stay in this house. I don't know how the children are going to continue to go to college. I don't know what I'm going to do because when he died, he didn't leave any insurance. And so not only is this person experiencing the loss of their spouse from, as a result of death, but they're also experiencing other multiple losses. One being, I don't have a house. I don't know how I'm going to make it. Another loss could be, not knowing how I'm going to get the kids through college. So it's a lot of different things that could be going on all at once. And I've had clients who've lost a spouse and have lost a parent, all within a couple of weeks, all within a couple of months. And so that adds to what I'm already dealing with. And then the grieving journey depends on, again, what else is going on in a person's life. Going back to the multiple losses, a person could be experiencing a loss as a result of death, and they could also be going through their own health issues. And sometimes, I've seen this when I used to work in hospice. I've been the caregiver, or that person has been the caregiver, and they're taking care of that person who is in hospice and who may be transitioning very, very soon. But then they end up neglecting their health. They end up neglecting their own well-being. And I've seen this happen where I had a client, she was taking care of her husband. She was taking care of her mother and her mother-in-law. And right in the midst of taking care of her mother and her mother-in-law, she ended up getting diagnosed with breast cancer. So all of this gets compounded into one thing. So again, it's allowing the person to be where they're at and allowing them to experience what they're going through, because at the end of the day, the grieving journey is also depends on what else is happening in a person's life. So now you can see what loss is. Loss is the absence of a possession or a future possession of something that is deemed meaningful, the absence of a relationship. So it's the loss of something that we once had. It's the loss of something that we may have gained, growing up or throughout our adult life. So it's the absence of something in our life. So that's what loss is. It's the absence of something that we had, the loss of something we may have possessed in our lives. So death loss, as I just mentioned, is grieving the loss of a loved one, a spouse, a child, a relative, a pet as a result of death. That is death loss. So it's what it says. It's the loss that we experience as a result of death. Then we have non-death loss. It's grieving the loss of anything significant to a person's physical, psychological, spiritual, and interpersonal life. Throughout our lives, we will experience non-death losses. Non-death losses is, say for instance, a person gets diagnosed with an illness. they're going through the grieving process. What do I do with this? How do I sit with this? You know, who do I talk to about the fact that I'm living with HIV, or I'm living with cancer, or I have, you know, prostate cancer, or I have breast cancer? Who do I talk to about this? I'm not dead yet, but people do grieve those non-death losses. People are grieving losses right now as a result of the coronavirus. People are grieving non-death losses as a result of the racial upheaval that we are experiencing right now. But most people will say, well, they're not dead, so why are you experiencing this loss? But you can see it's grieving the loss of anything significant to that person. People grieve the loss of a home. People grieve the loss of a job. And some people may be experiencing grief right now because some people have been laid off. Some people can't go back to their offices. Some people can't connect with their loved ones. So people are experiencing non-death loss because these are things that are significant to them. These are things that mean a lot to them. So for instance, I have a friend, her mom passed away a few weeks ago. And she couldn't go, and some of you may already know this, and some of you may have already experienced this or heard this. She couldn't go to the nursing home to be with her mom in her final hours. That's a non-death loss. The person is not dead yet, but I'm grieving the fact that I can't have that connection with her. I can't sit with her. I'm grieving the fact that, you know, I won't be able to talk to her. So these are some of the things that are considered non-death loss, is grieving the loss of something that's very significant. So in the chat box, I just want you to kind of write down briefly, what are some losses you've experienced and or may be experiencing right now? Because we are all experiencing some things right now due to the fact that we're dealing with this pandemic, due to the fact that we see the racial tension and the racial upheaval in our society. What are some losses have you experienced in your life and may be experiencing right now? So I'll give you a minute or so to write those things down. All righty. So we'll keep on going here. So as you can see, I wrote down a variety of losses. So you can see the different losses there. So you can see the loss of a spouse through death or divorce, a loss of a parent or child through death or divorce. You can see some other losses, a loss of a family member. And so this might be, this is a non-death loss. So loss of a family member or friend through moving and relocation. People grieve when they have to move, when they have to relocate. And so people, why are you grieving that? Once you move into your new place, once you move to a new state, to a new country, you'll regain friends, you'll regain people that can be a part of your life. But people do grieve that because they have to move, they have to relocate. And so people grieve that as well. Loss of a child through miscarriage, stillbirth, adoption, or abortion. People grieve the fact that they can no longer be, or they can't be a mother or father. So they grieve the loss of fertility. You can see the loss of a beloved pet, relationships. People grieve the loss of faith. People grieve loss due to military deployment, loss of self-esteem or self-worth. And so I tried to mix in death losses and non-death losses, but sometimes it seemed like we may experience more non-death losses than we do death losses. Loss of functioning through disability. I've had, working in hospice, I've had people say to me, well, I don't need somebody coming in here changing my depend, my diaper. People grieve that because once I used to be this, this young person who could take care of him or herself, but now I can't do that anymore. So people tend to get depressed. They feel anxious because it's a loss of functioning due to disability. Also loss of a sense of identity, security. People have a loss of their childhood due to abuse and neglect. People have a loss, they grieve the loss of a job, the loss of not having enough money, the financial instability, especially now with the things that we're going through, the loss of health due to illnesses or diseases. People, again, as I said before, people may be grieving that they have a terminal illness or diagnosis, loss of a home, loss of a parent. This tends to be very, very critical for a lot of people, because that person or that parent who used to love me and dote on me and was there for me, I'm grieving that, although she's not gone or he's not gone, but they are gone mentally and cognitively. They don't even know you anymore. So people do grieve the loss of a parent through Alzheimer's, dementia, loss of your youth. People want to be young again. Some of us do want to be young again. Loss of a child, or a family. When a child goes off to college and they transition to college, the family is grieving that, and the child may be grieving that, because that person or that child may, no longer have those parents or those doting parents or those protective parents who are taking care of everything. So loss does happen that way as well. Loss of a parent through absence or not being there. People lose the loss of their future, their memory, their independence, loss of control. You can see loss of trust, hope, loss of new opportunities. One of the things, loss of native homeland. When people have to come, to the United States, they have to leave their country for various reasons. They're fleeing persecution or whatever. The loss of that, because I still have family members that's in that country. So it's the loss of your native homeland, the loss of culture, the loss of, the language. It's all of those things, the loss of sobriety for a person who may be in recovery. So you can really see that there are a lot of different losses that we experience. And so at the end of the day, making sure that we understand what these losses are and allow people to experience those losses. You can see loss due to incarceration, immigration, loss of a generation, loss of love or intimacy, and loss of a marriage. So is it just loss or ambiguous loss? So ambiguous loss is definitely different from ordinary loss. There may be no verification that the person has died, no certainty that the person will come back. So a person who may have traumatic brain injury, that is ambiguous loss. Because that person is not the person that they were before. And when people have ambiguous loss, it freezes the grief process, and people are not able to get any closure with it. And sometimes it interferes with the way that the person functions. So for instance, if a person have gone off to the military, and like people who were in Vietnam War, or even the different wars that we've experienced in our lifetime too, or recent wars, the person goes off to war and they don't ever come back. And they say, well, we think this might be this person, but there is no body. And so it could be a child who may have been kidnapped, and there is no body. And so it is very, very difficult and very challenging to get some closure with that, because most of us, if a child has been kidnapped, or if a person goes off to war, they can't locate the body, we want the body because that helps us bring that closure. But then there are times when there is no body. And so it does freeze the grieving process. Also, there is another type of ambiguous loss. The other type is, as I was saying before, a parent or a person who has Alzheimer's. Their body is present, but cognitively they're not there anymore. And so that is ambiguous loss, because it's the psychological absence of the person, not able to, reach out to me, not able to touch me, don't even know who I am. They might say, well, who are you? You're my sister. And so, no, mom, I'm your daughter. No, mom, I'm your son. And it really causes a lot of strain on loved ones and family members, because they've been accustomed to seeing that person reach out, loving them, talking to them, but they don't even know who that person is. So it's not just loss, but it could be ambiguous loss that is not verified through death, or just loss when a person may have Alzheimer's or dementia and they don't know who we are. Then, as I was saying, you have multiple losses. Multiple losses or several losses felt or experienced simultaneously or in close proximity, as I was saying. We have a primary loss, and then there are multiple losses that are subsequent to the primary loss, or there are secondary losses. So if a person dies, there are multiple losses that follow after that. So not only do we have ambiguous loss, we have multiple losses. Then we have traumatic losses. Traumatic losses are reactions that we have after the death. So the death might have been sudden. It may have been unexpected. Like I had a client a couple years ago. Her husband left home. He was going out to work, and he never came back home. He had a major accident. And so that is very traumatic, because you see that person 1 minute, and then later on in the afternoon, you get a call that that person was in an accident and they lost their life. So that can be very traumatic, because it was sudden. You wasn't expecting that. You wasn't anticipating that when my loved one left home, that he or she would never return. Definitely violence. We can see a lot of violence in our world today, in our society today. And so a lot of violence that is happening in our society, those are traumatic losses, because it's sudden, it's unexpected. We wasn't anticipating. And also, if a loved one has an illness or disease, I didn't expect that person to die. He was doing well. Just recently, we had a friend who had COVID-19, but he was also having some lung capacity issues, and he was doing well. He recovered from COVID-19, was doing well, and then we got a call yesterday that he passed away. So sometimes that person might have been doing good. They were rehabbing, they were walking, they were talking, and then next thing you know, they passed away. So that can be very traumatic depending on the person and what they may be experiencing. It wasn't anticipated. We wasn't expecting them to go, because they were doing good. I just saw them yesterday. They were talking, they were up, they were moving around. And so that can be a traumatic loss for some people. Then you have stigmatized losses. So stigmatized losses are those losses that people tend not to talk about a lot. It's like, we ain't gonna talk about that. That's a hush hush. I had a client who lost her daughter as a result of taking her own life. And so one of the things that troubled her a lot is that, how do I tell people that my daughter took her own life? Should I even tell them? Is it important for them to even know? I don't even want to share with people. And so her daughter took her own life. And so I said, well, how are you going to handle that? And she said, I'm going to handle it in this way. If people ask me what happened to my daughter, I'm just going to say she passed away. Because when people take their life, they want to know what happened. What did she do? What did he do? Where were they? Where were you? You couldn't see the signs. And so she didn't really want to go through that. And I remember years ago when AIDS was this topic of conversation many, many years ago, and people were not explaining or telling, other people, well, he died as a result of AIDS or complication due to AIDS. Because people would say in the obituary, they would say, well, after a lengthy illness, or he had pneumonia, or he had cancer, because it was stigmatized. And people felt that people would not reach out to them, would not, engage them if they knew that they had a loved one who died as a result of suicide or as a result of AIDS. So as you can see, here are just some examples of stigmatized losses. As we talk, death by AIDS or complication due to AIDS, loss of same-sex partners, abortion. And people can say, well, people are more accepting of people who are in same-sex relationships, but that's not, I don't say but, and that's not always true. And sometimes, people won't say that this was my partner or this was my husband. For the most part, some people do, but then you still have people who won't say that because it tends to still be stigmatized. Abortion, homicide, suicide, substance use related causes, and mental health illnesses. All righty. So we're going to stop right there. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna give people a chance to talk a little bit. Let me go back. All right. Oops, what did I just do? Mess myself up here. All right. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to give people an opportunity to ask a couple questions. Oh, it's not on the screen. Okay. Oh, it's not on the screen. Okay. All right.
Okay. If anyone has any questions right now for Lisa, if you can just put them, if you raise your hand, I'll know to look for your comment in the chat function.
Kim, was it, the PowerPoint wasn't on the screen?
It was not, no.
Oh, Lordy. Okay. I apologize, everyone. It wasn't on the screen. I thought I had shared it. Okay, so I got to go back and do that.
Okay. So right now, if you have questions that you want to put into chat for Lisa, go ahead and write them, and then we'll maybe have a couple people ask their questions.
Now you can see it, right?
Nope. Still
you can't? Not. Okay. Let me see what's going on my end. I do apologize.
Okay, let me share my screen, or let's see.
Let's see what happened here. I don't know what happened to my screen.
Okay, so I am going to more.
Let's see.
Make co-host. Okay, now you have it.
I apologize, everyone. I'm gonna have to do this over.
Now you're fine. Now we can see your PowerPoint. Let's see if we have some questions.
So let me just kind of run, while people are getting their questions together, let me run back through this piece right here so people can see the screen.
Okay. Okay. And then I also saw that Andrew Like had his hand up.
Sorry, Andrew, go ahead. Do I have to unmute him?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me see. So I just go to participants.
Yep.
And Andrew?
Yep. Andrew Like, and he has an icon for his microphone.
All righty. I got him.
Okay.
Actually, I was just wanted to notify you that your screen, the PowerPoint wasn't up.
Andrew, I am so sorry. I was just talking, and I do apologize to everyone. I know people like, what in the world is wrong with her? So I do apologize.
Well, while I do have you here, I do have a question though.
Sure.
When someone is dealing with a preponderance of grief issues, it's not just one thing, not just a death, but of multiple things, and it feels like it's snowballing, Are there, prescribed approaches to help someone just go through that?
One of the things, Andrew, that I would say to you is that it is really allowing the person to be where they're at, allowing them to share their story with you. So I try not to push people to, to get to a certain place, because as I was saying before, the person who's grieving, that person is the expert in their journey. And what I do is I hold that space for them, meaning I walk the journey with them, but I allow them to be where they're at. And so you might want to say, I'm here, I'm listening. But sometimes, Andrew, what happens is we ask so many questions, and sometimes it's just a matter of just being silent and sitting with that person, because like I was saying, at the end of the day, that person is the expert in their journey. And so we want them to be where they're at. We really want them to be there. And so one of the things that I would say to you, Andrew, is that when I've worked with clients doing grief counseling, one of the things that I'm very cognizant about is that I don't give people Kleenexes to wipe their face. I put the Kleenex on the seat, or I put it on the floor next to them, and I let them get the Kleenex. Because for me, and the way I see it, when I give a client a Kleenex, to me, it's me telling them to shut up. I don't want to hear that. Let's just keep it rolling. So I would say, even if they're experiencing a multitude of things, it's still allowing them to be where they're at. I hope that helps you.
It does. What I'm hearing you saying is just, we lead them to water, but we can't make them drink, and just let them drink as much as they want.
That's right. That's right. Because it's a personal journey. It's a personal journey. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Lisa, we have another question from Ike Udo. If he would like to go ahead and ask the question.
Want me to unmute? Oh, yeah, she's unmuted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. It's there's two questions in one. One of them is like, in your practice, like, do you have what's the most frequently occurring kind of grief that you deal with? And then I have a second question that, given the traumatic effect of seeing sort of George Floyd's suffocation, like, how can we work through this particular loss and create spaces for grief?
So the first one, the first answer is, what I'm seeing mostly, and it's been lately, is non-death loss. That's what I'm really seeing. When I worked in hospice, yes, I saw a lot of death loss. And even after people had died, they were still experiencing a variety of losses, because it wasn't just the fact that my spouse died, or my child died, or my mom died, but there were some other losses. I no longer have that companionship. I no longer have that relationship. I no longer have that intimacy. So I'm finding that right now, if we were to say now, it's a lot of non-death loss. And as far as George Floyd, I think creating some space for that to happen and be very intentional about it, because, and we'll talk a little bit more as we get further along in the presentation. And again, to all of you who are listening, I do apologize that the PowerPoint wasn't on the screen, but as we, creating that space, and be very intentional about the space you create, because one of the things that we do as a society sometimes, why are you crying about that? You ain't even know the man. So, like, say, for instance, somebody might say, well, like when Prince died, I'll just use that as an example, or Michael Jackson died. People were grieving celebrities. And most people say, I don't even know why you even upset about that. You didn't even know who they were. So why are you crying about George Floyd? You didn't know him. You wasn't a part of that. It's still creating that space for people to share where they're at with it. And so one of the things I wanted to say is that when things happen, it brings up a lot of different emotions for a person. So George Floyd incident and some other incidents that have occurred in our society may be a trigger for a lot of different people. So it may be a reminder to someone else, man, you know what? My son went through that with the police, or just seeing him die. I experienced that when my mom was laying on, in the hospital bed. So being intentional about the space you create, being intentional about, as I was saying before to Andrew, not always talking, but allowing the person to express how they're feeling, and validating. This is the very important part to what we need to do as it relates to George Floyd and everything else that is going on in our society, is to validate what they are experiencing and not minimize what they're dealing with. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa, we have another question from Mary McCluskey, and she's going to ask that.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for this great information. So my question is about replacement. I work in reproductive loss healing, specifically like for abortion. And one of the things that apparently some women do is they go back out and try to get pregnant again. So I guess my question generally is, for grief, is replacement attempts to try and replace what was lost, is that generally always considered unhealthy coping mechanism?
It can be because if you lost a child as a result of miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion, you can't go back and replace that particular child. And so it could be unhealthy. And so really delving a little deep into, what are some coping things that's going to help you? What are some things that we can talk about? What are some things that's going to be beneficial to you? Because even if they have another child, it's still going to be the sense of loss from losing that child before. And so I have a friend who her daughter died when I think her daughter was like 9 months old. And so she's still grieving that. And so it's helping people get to a place of healthiness. And then how do we do that? As I was saying before, we create the space, we allow them to talk, we give them things to do. So one of the things that I do with clients a lot, I give them work to do. That I give them opportunities to journal. I give them opportunities to write letters. I do a lot of different things with my clients because because what happens is we hold things in and we don't express them. And so at the end of the day, even having another child is not going to take the pain away from losing the former child. And so really allowing that person to go through the journey, to process it in so many different ways, because you can't replace that child. And I know some people do go out and get pregnant real fast. You can't replace it, but giving them some healthy coping styles or some healthy coping mechanism to deal with that. I hope that helps, Mary.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we're gonna Kim, we're gonna stop right there. We're gonna go through.
Yeah, I think that was, we may have another question from Ann Carter, but we'll hold that one if it's okay.
Okay.
So let me just hold that one until later and I'll remember.
So I'm just going back through some of these so people can see them. I know I messed that up, but you can see the various losses here. I just wanted to show these to you again. And sometimes we don't always understand or always think, man, you could probably add many more things to this list and not realizing, oh my goodness, loss of sobriety. So, there's so many different things that you can add. So these talks about multiple losses, traumatic losses, stigmatized losses. All right, so let's get to uncomplicated grief. We're going to get to a few examples of grief. So uncomplicated grief is often, quote unquote, what we call normal. It may include physical, emotional, cognitive, behavior, and spiritual responses to loss. So a person with uncomplicated grief, they're going through the process. They're dealing with their grief. They're having the signs, the physical symptoms. They're experiencing the emotional symptoms, the cognitive. They're going through that. And the reason why in hospice we call this uncomplicated grief is because people had other resources in place, they had other support systems, and so they went through grief in a quote unquote normal way. And so that's what uncomplicated grief. They're going through the motion. They're going through the cycle. They're doing all the things that they need to do for them. And it's not grieving because mom wants me to grieve or dad wants me to grieve or my pastor wants me to grieve or my clinician wants me to grieve. No, I'm grieving because this is what I need to do for me. This is what I need to do to take care of me. And so that is called uncomplicated grief. All right, so the next thing we get to is anticipatory grief. So anticipatory grief is what people experience before the actual loss. So in hospice, when I was working in hospice, people were starting to grieve the loss before the person died. They were starting to grieve the loss of the relationship before the person died. And so anticipatory grief is that awareness that something is about to happen. It's an impending loss. We know that it's coming. You got the foreclosure notices in the mail. You know you're about to lose your home. You got the pink slip. You know you're about to lose your job. On your job, they say, it's the furlough. You know it's coming. So that's anticipatory grief. You know the loss is coming. It's impending. You know that. So it's grieving before the actual loss. Some people find that it's socially unacceptable to express that and receive the support they need. So losing a job, okay, you can get another job. Okay, why are you dealing with that? Why are you grieving that? Well, maybe because I was on that job for 25 years and I know I'm about to lose that job. I know the government is about to shut down, and I know that I won't be around my coworkers. I've been with them for 25 years. So sometimes people won't even share what they're experiencing and what they're feeling because of the stigma, because of, you know, the negativity, because of people being critical. And so anticipatory grief, you know, it's about to happen. So sometimes people won't share. Also, a diagnosis could be anticipatory grief, a terminal illness. The person who actually has a terminal illness could be grieving the fact that, you know, this is my second round of chemo, you know, I'm dealing with radiation, I'm dealing with all of this. So they could be grieving the fact that they have this illness. Also, I said foreclosure, natural disaster, child going away to college, people getting deployed in the military, again, leaving your native homeland, your country. These are anticipatory. This is anticipatory grief. You know that the loss is coming, and so you start to grieve right away. So that's anticipatory grief. Then you have disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is that grief that is not socially acceptable. It's not acknowledged. You can't do it in the public. So for instance, an example of disenfranchised grief might be somebody crying because their dog ran out in the street and got hit by a car and died, or the dog had cancer, or a woman had a stillbirth or a miscarriage or an abortion. This type of grief is not socially acceptable. It's not, people don't go out publicly mourning. Oh, I'm just having a difficult time right now because I had an abortion. You know, I'm experiencing this, and people going to look at, well, it was your choice. You didn't have to have an abortion. And so people tend to hold on to that. They keep that safe. They don't share it. Because they feel like, you know, people will not validate what I'm experiencing. I can't go out and publicly mourn my child because it was something that I did. So the shame and the guilt starts to slip in. And so people don't feel like they will be validated. Also, I've had situations where there was mistresses who couldn't go to the funeral of their, you know, the person they were having an affair with. Lovers couldn't go to the funeral. Ex-spouses or partners didn't want to go to the funeral of their ex, you know, partner or loved one because, you know, well, why are you here? You ain't married to them anymore. So I had a situation in my family where my aunt passed away and my uncle, they were divorced, and my uncle wanted to be a part of the service. And everybody was like, well, why are you going? You're not married to her anymore. So this is called disenfranchised grief. Can't openly acknowledge and express, this is how I'm feeling. I was once married to that person, but I still feel some type of way. I'm still a human. And so it's not validated. And that's why people don't openly express it. Then you have complicated grief. Complicated grief is that chronic grief. It continues, it never subsides. You know, you're dealing with it over time. And complicated grief happens, you know, when sometimes when people experience stigmatized loss or traumatic loss, sometimes it leads to complicated grief. It's chronic, it's still happening, it continues, so it becomes delayed. And so one of the things that I used to tell my clients, or I would tell my clients, let's deal with this now. Because I would say this to clients, if we don't deal with it now, it's going to come back. I guarantee you it's going to come back. And not that I guarantee a lot of things, but because of the work that I've done with grief and loss, I know it's coming back. It's going to be something that's going to trigger it. And so what people tend to do, they delay it. So think about you asking someone, well, how are you coming along? Oh, I'm okay. I'm doing good. I'm all right. So they delay it. It's delayed. They postpone it or they suppress it. So what people will do is they'll say, well, I got to do this. Well, you know, let me put you on my calendar. Okay, I got this at 8. I have this at 8:15. Now I got this at 8:30. I got to do this at 9 o'clock. So what they do, they inundate their life with so many different things so that they don't have to acknowledge that the loss has occurred. And so that's why it can lead to complicated grief, because they're suppressing it. They're postponing it. And so the other part of it is they'll say, well, I don't feel like I can be strong around my family members because they're going to judge me. So all I have to do is just suck it up and just keep on being the person that I am. So it gets delayed, and then they inundate their life with so many different things to avoid the pain of the loss. So then it leads to complicated grief. Then you have exaggerated grief, or it becomes exaggerated, meaning that the grief starts to resort to self-destructive behaviors. People start to engage in risky sexual behaviors. People start to drink, they do drugs. People, sometimes people start going out and shopping, shopping to the hilt. They start gambling. They start getting involved in porn. They start, internet addiction. So it leads. So what exaggerated is, it leads to self-destructive behaviors. Then you have mass grief. And it's grief in which the person is not aware that whatever they're experiencing is interfering with their normal functioning. So they're not aware that I'm withdrawing, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm angry. They don't aware that what they're experiencing and how they're responding to other people are interfering with the way they're functioning on a normal basis. So you have delayed, you have exaggerated, and you have mass as a result of complicated grief. So I wanted to just kind of give you this statement. It says, let grief find the freedom to be expressed. Let grief find the right to be understood. And so the other thing about complicated grief that I wanted to mention is that feelings of loss, when it's just overwhelming feelings of loss, that's why it's chronic. They become debilitating. They don't improve over time. And sometimes people get stuck in their pain because, they're in denial. They use other things to distract them. They become isolated from the people who can support and love them. They avoid. So all of these things is a result of complicated grief, right? So let grief find the freedom to be understood. Let grief find the right, let grief find the freedom to be expressed. Let grief find the right to be understood. And that's by Kai Gilbert. So if you want to make a comment about that statement, you can do it in the chat box. So these are some physical responses to grief. And so I had a client who thought that she was having a heart attack, and she wasn't having a heart attack. It was anxiety. Her husband had just passed away, and so she was having some physical responses to grief. So, when people go through grief, these are some physical things that happen. I mean, it is the emptiness. It's the hollowness in the stomach. It's also people's appetite change. Sometimes they lose their appetite, but then some people tend to overeat. It's the emotion that's involved in it that helps the person relieve some of the things that they may be experiencing. You can see people have difficulty sleeping. They're not sleeping. They go to sleep at 12 o'clock. They wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. They may cry at unexpected times, and you may look at the person as, why is she crying? Okay, what is going on with that person? So, but it may happen at times you may not even anticipate or expect. Changing in a person's mood, they become depressed. Sometimes they become anxious. Definitely other physical responses is shortness of breath, not having energy, feeling numb, dizzy. So all of these are physical responses to grief. And so when I was looking at it, and when I was working with clients in hospice, I'm like, man, it's a lot of things that's associated with grief. And people don't think that these particular things are actual responses to grief, but they are actual responses to grief. And people experience them. They have headaches. So it's a lot of different things that people experience as a result of grief. So in the chat box, if you can, I'm going to give you less than 2 minutes because I was late getting on. I'll give you about a minute. So if you can just type in, name as many feelings as you can that's associated with grief. Just type in as many things as you can, or many feelings as you can that's associated with grief. And I'll give you about a minute to do that. And I don't want to look at the chat box because I look at it, I might get myself off track here. So we're going to talk about those. All right. So you can keep typing if you want, just type the emotions. So on the previous slide, you can see that there are different emotions and different feelings that's associated with grief. You can see this on the slide. And also when you think about grief and the emotions that's associated with it, it's a tangled ball of emotion. So it's intertwined. So you can see like denial tends to be at the center of it. And then you see that everything else is intertwined like a ball of yarn. It's intertwined with one another. So you can see that I may have rage, but rage could be intertwined with sorrow and anguish. And it may be intertwined with betrayal. It may be intertwined with anxiety and inadequacy and fear. That's how grief is. It's not in a straight line, but all of the emotions that people experience get intertwined with one another. As I was saying earlier on, you may feel sad when you wake up in the morning, or a person may feel sad when they wake up in the morning, but in the next 30 minutes, they can be angry at the person, especially they can be angry at the person who may have died. Well, why did you die? Why did you leave me? I'm here all alone. Or they can be angry because, well, why didn't you pay the mortgage? And why did you have to lose your job? Or why did you have to go to the military? Why did you even join the military? So it could be a lot of different things that's intertwined one with another. So you can see that people have so many different emotions that's attached to grief. So I wrote, a few of them down here. As you can see on the PowerPoint, you see anger, you see being afraid, anxious, being bitter, being confused, being depressed, no hope, being in despair, detaching yourself, feeling empty, feeling lost, feeling guilty, helpless, hopeless, jealousy. I had a client who said to me that her friend had invited her to a Mother's Day brunch. And so she said, Lisa, I'm just going to tell you the truth. That's my friend. I ain't want to go to lunch with her and her mom because my mom died. And so I felt this jealousy, kind of rearing up in me because she had an opportunity to experience a Mother's Day brunch with her mom, but I don't. And so there was, just the jealousy and the envy. So these are all emotions, and they're normal emotions. You can see guilty, being lonely, lost, numb, overwhelmed with stuff, preoccupied, relief. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about relief. So people would say to me, well, how can relief be an emotion? Why would it be emotion? Why would somebody be relieved? Well, there's a lot of different reasons why people can be relieved. They can be relieved for the simple fact that their loved one's not suffering anymore and they have transitioned. They can be relieved because of the fact that I was caregiver for 12 years. And I had a client who was the caregiver for her mom for 12 years. And so the relief of the mom, transitioning was a relief for her because I don't have to do this every day anymore. And some people like, okay, really? Okay, something's really wrong with you. But it is a sense of relief, or it's a sense of relief that, I don't have to do this anymore. I can go on with my life. Sometimes, depending on what's going on with the person and the loved one, it could be a sense of relief because, say, for instance, a person may have been in a domestic violence relationship and the person or the loved one or the spouse or whatever died. They may be relieved because they're dead, because now I don't have to deal with the abuse or deal with, the violence at the hands of my perpetrator. So it could be a variety of reasons why the person is relieved. And then you have some people who are relieved because they know that they're written in the will. So, so it's a lot of different reasons why people are relieved. Also, you see resentment. Sadness is not the only thing that's associated with grief. There are so many other things that's associated with grief. Cognitive responses, confusion. So I had a client who was very confused. She said, you know what, Lisa, I knew I had an appointment with you, but I don't remember how I got here. She said, I got in my car and I started driving and I ended up in your parking lot. I don't even remember getting here. So sometimes cognitive responses, confusion, not being able to concentrate. Also, cognitive responses could be just constant dreams about the person who's deceased, or even about that loss you may have experienced. Disbelief, not believing that it's happening, it's surreal. I know I'm going to wake up in the morning and everything's going to be back to normal. Also, people tend to search for meaning when they experience loss. When it's death, they search for meaning in life. What was that person's life all about? How can I give that person's life meaning? So all of these are some cognitive ways. Also, some behavior responses. People start leaving work early, coming to work late. They take a lot of breaks. They're withdrawing from their coworkers. They tend to cry. They don't want any reminders of the person that may have died. I had a client who said, I'm telling you right now, when I worked in hospice, we would send out, bereavement notes every 3, 6, 9 months until it was a year, up to a year. And so I had a person say, I've told y'all over and over again, I don't want any reminders coming to my house. My husband died, so please take me off of your list. So people try to avoid reminders of the deceased. They'll sweep out the house. They'll go in and clean out everything because they don't want to be reminded of that person. In the first week, you're like, okay, they're getting rid of everything like tomorrow. But that's the behavior responses to grief. They don't want any reminders of that person. It's almost like that person never existed. People become overreactive. They blow up in an instant. Relationships do change. And self-destructive behaviors. These are behavior responses to grief. And relationships change because, say, for instance, you were a married couple and your spouse is deceased. So you used to go out with other married couples. And so those other married couples don't feel comfortable with you being, going bowling with them or you being in company with them because your spouse is not there. So relationships do change and families, they change. And sometimes they change because people wasn't included in the will and they didn't get any insurance money. So that sometimes happens as well. Then you have spiritual responses to grief. When people go through grief, they do lose their faith in God. Sometimes they confused about God. Is God even around? Is he present? Is there even a God? Or a higher power for some of you. They question God about the death or the loss, and they can't understand why. Why did this have to happen to me? I've had clients say, Lisa, can you just tell me why did it happen? Why did I have to go through this? Why am I going through all of this? Can you tell me why? And people will ask you why. And I tell them, I don't know why. I'm not God. I don't know. I don't know why. I can sit here with you and we can walk the journey together because I can't give them an answer. And for people who can give somebody an answer, good for you. But I can't. Because I don't know why. People get angry with God about the death, about the loss. Oh, God, I'm angry with you. I had one lady say to me, I was praying and I knew God was going to heal my husband. I was just praying. And then when he passed away, she said, I'm so angry with God because I did all the right things. I said all the right things. I operated in the way that I knew I was supposed to, and he still died. And so these are the spiritual responses that people have. Sometimes people don't go back to their religious practices. They don't go to worship service. They don't attend church, and then spiritual response could also be not having hope and just this inability to forgive, and not just to forgive God. They have an inability to forgive the person who may have passed or died, or they may have an inability to forgive themselves. So I'm not going to go too much, but the 7 stages of grief was modified from Kubler-Ross. So she had shock, denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance. So now you have 7 stages. It's been modified. And so the modification deals with 2 extra steps. And so I'll go back and talk a little bit about that. So shock. So this is how I talk about shock. I believe shock is a way to protect us. So the way I see it is that God forms a cocoon around us. It's kind of protective mechanism to prevent us from completely being overwhelmed by devastating news that we may have received. So I think it's a way to be in that cocoon. It's kind of like it initially paralyzes us because actually numbness occurs, numbness steps in. And I think it's a way to help us, so that when the numbness wears off. And so think about it this way. I think about it when I go to the dentist and they put Novocaine, in my mouth. My mouth is numb. But eventually, gradually, that numbness goes away. And it's the same thing with grief. Eventually, that numbness is going to subside and it's going to go away. And then that's when the real pain starts to come in. So I think the numbness and the shock and all that we experience is a way to help us deal with and process the hurt and the pain that's going to come, when that numbness subsides. Also, denial. People deny that the loss have happened. They push it away. They become overwhelmed. And, they say, well, it didn't happen. I'm going to wake up. It's going to be all right. It can't be so. So denial is also part of that. Then you have anger. And we talked about anger is one of those emotions. It's a release of those emotions that get bottled up. And that's why I give people the space to really share, because anger is one of those emotions that tends to get bottled up a lot. And so people don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to sit with it. They don't know how to process it. Who do I give it to? Who do I share it with? And people think anger is bad. But we are emotional beings, so anger is all part of the process. And so individuals may be angry at themselves for how they're responding to the loss, that they couldn't do anything to prevent it. They may push people away. They may go into this whole explosive release. Then it's bargaining. Why me? Why did I have to go through this? Why did this happen to me? Why didn't it happen to somebody else? I'm a good person. I do all the right things. Why do I have to experience this pain? And so individuals often try to bargain, in vain with God or a higher power for a way out of their despair. So they might say, my husband is lying in the hospital. I'll go to church if you heal him. Or I will do this. Or I'll be this type of person if you give me back my home, or if you give me my job back. So it's this whole bargaining that's all part of it. Then you have depression and sorrow. It's really depression and sorrow is one of the stages that's been added. It's finally realizing the true magnitude of the loss. And so sometimes when it happens, the person gets very, very depressed. Individuals tend to isolate themselves on purpose. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to see anybody. If somebody calls them, tell them, I don't feel good. So they purposefully isolate themselves from other people. They have feelings of emptiness or despair. And also it's the final realization of the inevitable reality of what just occurred in their life. So it's depression and sorrow. Then testing and reconstruction is when the mind starts working again. So this is the process when the mind starts working again. And people begin to find themselves seeking realistic solutions. Now I'm ready to dive into this work. Now I'm ready to push forward and to move forward. Individuals starts to reconstruct their lives. They reconstruct themselves, who they are. They begin to rediscover their identity. They begin to rediscover their independence, without the loved one in their lives or without that loss. So that's testing and reconstruction. And then you get to acceptance and hope. And that's the final one, is when individuals learn to accept and deal with the reality of their situation, what is taking place, the loss. And then acceptance doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be instantly happy. But at this point, they're ready to push forward. They're ready to move forward. And they're ready to get to, a new normal, or the way they want life to be. And so individuals start looking forward, and they begin to start planning their lives out. They begin to start looking at the future. They begin to start discovering hope, along with anticipating and having an expectation that good things are about to come and good things about to happen in their life. And they potentially find joy again in living. And so these are the 7 stages of grief modified from Kubler-Ross. And so one of the things that I really want to hone in on is that this list is not linear. It's like, okay, now I've gone through shock. Okay, now my next step is denial. Okay, I've gotten through that. My next stage is anger. People may start at acceptance and hope and go back to shock. So it's not linear. And as you saw the emotions in the ball, That's just how the stages are. So definitely it's not a linear process. So yes or no, put in a chat box, yes or no. Some people tend to think that grieving over a pet is dumb. Yes or no. So I'll give you a minute to put that in the chat box. Some people tend to think that grieving over a pet is dumb. The next one is we do not always acknowledge how others grieve from different cultures. Yes or no? We do not always acknowledge how others grieve from different cultures. Clients may minimize feelings because they feel their loss will not be validated. Yes or no? Clients may minimize feelings because they feel their loss will not be validated. Yes or no? And I'll give you a moment. So the first one is some people tend to think that grieving over a pet is dumb. We do not always acknowledge how others grieve from different cultures. And clients may minimize feelings because they feel their loss will not be validated. All right. So Kim, I'm going to stop there and give people a chance to give a couple people a chance to ask questions. Or if you have some responses in the chat box, we'll stop there and then we'll finish out with the rest of it.
Okay, we do have, let's see, Ann Carter had a question. And let me get her to unmute and she can ask her question.
Thank you for doing that, because I was like, okay, I don't want to have to do it and start messing stuff up again. So y'all be patient with me. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology.
Okay, I think Ann's ready for you, Lisa.
Go ahead, Ann.
Yes, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine, Ann. How you doing?
Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to follow up on one of the questions about George Floyd and so much of the racial trauma that's occurring and loss. And just to add, to kind of piggyback on what you had stated, that important to really have self-care. When I work with people, I have them to do self-care, whether that's meditation, deep breathing exercises, prayer. And then once they take care of themselves, then often to regain their hope and to increase it and their advocacy and efficacy, there may be things that they can do, a sense of purpose, of making a difference, whether it's talking about it, whether it's joining groups of people, for example, if we're talking about racial justice, that are making a difference there. So there's lots of ways that people can be active while taking care of themselves, especially in this time of really great events and losses as well. And as you so aptly pointed out, we don't have to know a person to feel the loss. And that brings a lot of historical trauma. So I work a lot with women, especially Black women, African-American women, and others about hope and increasing that. So I just wanted to add that to the gentleman that had asked about what do we do in this case of Floyd? And there are things. We don't have to be so paralyzed, and we can move through that loss. So I just wanted to add that. And if that was helpful, if any other questions, I can certainly follow up. But thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that. Definitely. One other person?
Okay, I have Annie Elizabeth Parks had her hand raised. And I think she has a question.
Hi, thank you so much for your willingness to serve and your dedication and for providing this webinar. Actually, I was asking to, since we weren't able to see the slides, if you could just go back and show us, but you've already done that, so thank you.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And I do apologize again to everyone on the line. Y'all
you don't have to apologize to me because I'm a fellow dinosaur. I understand.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Thank you so much. That makes me feel good. One other question, if someone else have a question, and then we'll continue to move forward.
Okay, if someone has a question, they want to raise their hand, they can just under the more button at the bottom. Oh, wait a minute.
And it's easier, Kim, that you're doing this instead of me trying to finagle with it, because then I can focus on this. So I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I don't see any other questions. However, Andrew says that yelling at God is still prayer, which is very true.
That's right. Thank you, Andrew, for that comment. So we'll keep moving. We'll keep moving. So think about the myths that are going about a grief, or going around about grief, and what people are saying. So you can see the little caption here. Yeah, if you could go ahead and get over your grief already, that'd be great. And so people are uncomfortable with people sharing and crying and expressing and owning. And so people will say, please, I'm ready for you to get over that. And as I was saying in the beginning, people will say, you know what, I'll be here for you. Tell me what you need. Just call me anytime. But people don't always mean that, because they'll say, oh my goodness, oh, she calling again? She just called me yesterday. She just called me 2 days ago. He just reached out to me on Facebook, or he just emailed me, and he's emailing me again. So after a while, people become really upset about it. And that's why I don't say, call me, reach out to me anytime, because when we offer that, people hold you fast to that. And when you say call me anytime, you may get a call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, for me, and I'm just owning me, and as Ann was talking about self-care, I have to take care of me too. And so one of my colleagues, what we would do is put like parameters on our phone. After 5 o'clock, we would say, in the event of an emergency, dial 911 or go to your nearest hospital, or, because we need to take care of ourselves too. But when we say call me anytime, I guarantee you people will call you at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and they want to talk. But you definitely have to take care of yourself. And so people are ready for people to get over their grief. So here's a couple or a few myths that I wanted to share with you. Time heals all wounds. That sounds good. That sounds good, because if that was the case, we'll all be in a different space right now. But time doesn't always heal all wounds. And it also depends on the person, what they're experiencing, what they're going through, the relationship they may have had, the loss that they've experienced. What I will say, though, is that at the beginning, loss is very intense. It can be very overwhelming. It's very challenging. As time goes on, it's not going to feel the same. Yes, will there be triggers? Most definitely. Like I said before, you may smell something, you may see something. It may be a favorite food that person had, or a favorite food you cooked in your house, and you're no longer in your house. You may be living in an apartment. It's going to trigger things. Or you may see something on TV. So there are going to be triggers. But what I want to say is that it's not going to feel as intense as it did when the loss first happened. Grieve alone. That is a myth. Okay, grieve by yourself. You can do it. You all right. You don't need me. You strong. You've always been strong. And that leads to myth 3. Be strong. Because people will say, well, you was able to get over that. You got over that. You did good with that. Shoot, I wish I had your strength. And so, well, if you got over that, what's wrong with getting over this? You've always been a strong one in the family. You was the one that helped me get through my stuff. Well, when can I be weak? When can I be vulnerable? When can I give my stuff to you? When can I release what I'm dealing with? And so this whole myth about being strong, strength does not have anything to do with grief. Keep busy is a myth. I just said people will keep busy. They will have every second, every minute in their calendar slotted out or crossed out. They're always doing something because they don't want to accept the reality of the loss. Grief has an endpoint is a myth. Grief does not have an endpoint. Grief, well, in 2024, I'll be over with this. Well, maybe by next year, this time, I'll be doing okay. I tell clients all the time, grief has no endpoint. There is no endpoint to grief. As I said with myth 1, I may not feel as intense as I do today, but 10 years down the road, something may happen. Or say, for instance, a man loses his wife and she dies and he gets married again. It may be something that may trigger something in him, and, as he's thinking about the love of his life, that, not saying that his current wife may not be the love of his life, but he may go back and start thinking about his first wife. So grief has no endpoint. There is no timeline for grief. There is, okay, well, and it kind of goes with myth 5. There is no timeline for grief. No one says, okay, in 6 months, I'm going to be fine. This time next year, I'm going to be doing good. There is no timeline. And it also, and this is the key point, it also depends on the person. It depends on the individual. That's why at the beginning, we individualize it and we make it unique to the person who is experiencing it. Children should not attend funerals is a myth. So some people may not agree with this, but it's a myth. One of the things that I would tell my clients, and I used to tell my clients, is that what's wrong with the child going to a funeral? Well, I don't want them exposed to that. That's going to cause some traumatic event. They also need to see you grieving. And when children don't see adults grieving, they don't know how to do it healthy. And so if you're shielding them and protecting them all the time, then they don't know how to do this. And so children need to see adults experiencing emotions. And so when I was growing up, they would say, children are seen and not heard. And what are you crying about? What do you have? What are you feeling? Or you don't have a reason to be upset. And so parents and adults would say that to children. And so I'm like, no, children are little people. They're not big people. They're little people, and they also have emotions. So this is a myth. Children should be a part of funerals, should be a part of the process. And then as adults, we should have some conversation and some dialogue about what it means, to go to a funeral and to help them process and help them understand. And see, the thing about it is we don't sit down and have conversations about funerals and death and dying, because to be honest with you, it is a hard topic to talk about. People don't even want to write wills. They don't want to do advance directives, because that means I got to talk about the fact that at some point I'm leaving this earth. And so we tend to shield children and overprotect them because we don't want them to be a part of it. But they need to see it, because they're going to become adults one day and they need to process and know how to do it in a healthy way. If you're not crying, then you're not grieving. Everybody don't cry. Everybody don't boo-hoo and shed tears. So that doesn't mean you're not grieving. You could be angry. You could be confused. You could be disappointed. You could be upset. You could be lost. Just because you're not crying doesn't mean that you're not going through the grieving process. All right. So here's some other common myths. When grief is resolved, it never comes up again. I just said that grief has no endpoint. It's better to put painful thoughts out of your mind. That's avoidance. No, when it comes, you need to sit with it. You need to process it. You need to talk through it. And if you need to call someone, then you need to do that. The intensity and length of your grief are a testimony to your love for the deceased or what you've lost. No, how long you do it and the quality of it does not have anything to do with your love for the person who died or for the loss you had in your life. It's better to stay in control, quote unquote, and keep a stiff upper lip. That is the most absurd. I don't even know who came up with that, but that is the most, challenging, the most difficult, and the most, I don't want to say it. I'll just say, I don't know who came up with that. It's better to stay in control. No, when I cry or when I release my emotion, that means that I'm human and I'm allowing myself to go through this process. Again, crying doesn't solve anything. That's a myth. And it's better to put the memories of your loved one in the past and go on with life. Those are some common myths that people have. So in the chat box, I want you to write, think of some common responses or comments people make when someone is grieving or have experienced loss. And I'm going to share some of the ones that I've heard. I know you may have a laundry list of ones, but I'm going to share some of the ones that I heard. So I'll give you a second or two to do that, and then I'm going to show you the list. Some common responses or comments people make when someone is grieving or has experienced loss. You can see it. I got more than that. He was sick. You knew he was going to die. I had a client and she was, her dad had prostate cancer. And so they was at the funeral home. And so somebody came up to her and she said, and she said this to my client. Well, I'm sorry for your loss. Well, I just want to say this. He was sick. You knew he was going to die anyway. Really? So that really did something to my clients. So we had to work through that. We had to process that. You can see some other common responses. It was God's will. They're better off now. And so one of my clients said, well, how do she know my mom is better off now? Did she go somewhere and find out? Did my mom tell her she was better off now? No, she's better off when she's here with me. At least they're not in any more pain. There must be a reason. There may not be a reason. You'll be okay. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh. They are resting in heaven. This is the one that gets me, the next one. I know how you feel. No, you don't. You don't know how I feel. Why would you say that? You don't know how I feel. Well, I went through the same loss. I lost my mom. I just said that everybody's responses to grief is very different. So for you to say you know how I feel, you don't know the relationship I had with my mom. Maybe I ain't like my mom. Maybe me and my mom had an estranged relationship. So you're going to tell me you know how I feel? No, you don't. And we say that all the time. I know how you feel. I understand how you feel. Really? You do? Okay. This is what happens when you live that type of lifestyle. So somebody who may be using drugs, somebody may be infected with HIV or full-blown AIDS, may say this is what happens when you live that type of lifestyle. You must and you should move on. You can get married again. You will get over it in time. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. I know y'all can read, but I'm just saying it how people say it. It'll be all right. You'll get through it. What happened? Because there are people nosy. What happened? Was she sick? How did she pass? Was she in the hospital long? This is what happened when I was telling you about my client whose daughter took her own life. That's what they asked. Was she sick? I didn't know she was sick. You never told me she was in the hospital. People might say, snap out of it. You got to be strong for your family. That's one people always say. They lived a good life. Well, you know, they were 96 years old. They lived a good life anyway. You've gotten through other things. You can get through this. You're the strong one. You still talking about that? God will never give you more than you can handle. Be thankful you can have other children. Get a hold of yourself. Pull yourself together. You can always have other children. You're young. Others have it worse than you. At least they're not suffering. They're in a better place. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal. He did it to himself. She did it to herself. It's just a house. It's just a dog. It's just a cat. You've gotten through worse. Those are some of the things. And as I said, some of you can add more to that. And going back to children, I do want to say this about children. So what adults tend to say is that grandma is resting or grandma is in heaven. And so I've had kids say, well, if she resting, when she going, oh no, she's sleeping. So if grandma's sleeping, when she gonna wake up? And so then what happens is children don't understand that. They can't process that. And what happens also to children, they become very afraid to go to sleep because they feel like, okay, with grandma resting and sleeping and she didn't wake up, then I'm afraid to go to sleep because if I go to sleep, I may not wake up. And so that's why it's important for adults to talk to children about grief and loss. These are some of the things we can say. I just simply say, I'm sorry for your loss. Whether I know the person or not, whether it's a family member or a friend, I'm sorry for your loss. Period. I know it's not a period on the PowerPoint, but it's period. It's nothing else to say. We want to write a dissertation. We want to write a book. We want to write a novel about how we made it over, how we got through it. It's not about us. It's not about us. It's about the person who's experiencing their loss. Just say, I'm sorry for your loss. You might say, you know what? I can't imagine what you are going. Instead of saying, I know how you feel, I can't imagine what you're going through. I care. I don't know why. Or you can say, I don't know what to say, but I'll be glad to listen. Or I don't know why. I'm glad to sit here with you. I'm glad to share this moment with you. I'm glad to be here and hold this space for you. What can I do to help? Or nothing. Just be silent. Just listen. Maybe hold that person's hand. And not with coronavirus now, y'all. You can't give a hug or a kiss or hold a person's hand. But definitely be silent and just sit there and listen to their story. These are just some simple things to do. But like I said, we go through this whole long laundry list of things to help them get over their loss because we do have good intention. We don't, most of us, maybe all of us, don't like to see people suffering. So we do say the things to help them get past their loss, to get past the suffering and the pain. Nobody can do that. None of us can fix it for them. all you can do is just say, I'm here. I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to listen. Whatever you need to share, just be there. Just your presence there. Okay. So the two most biggest emotions are guilt and regret. So with guilt, it's associated with the wouldas, couldas, or shouldas. And many of us have the guilt. And the guilt is associated with things that we did wrong when that person was living, or things that we did wrong to lead to the loss or to result in a loss, or things we thought we did wrong, or things, that we could have done differently. I won't say better, but differently. And so sometimes it's the guilt that's associated with that, because we would have done this, we could have done this, and we should have done that. And that's where the guilt starts to come in. And guilt and regret are two of the most biggest emotions, or I don't want to say biggest, but they're difficult to really process and deal with, because it is the guilt. It goes beyond should I have done that? If only I had done that. I ought to have done that. Why didn't I do that? Why did I put my dad in a nursing home? Why did I allow my dad to go to the hospital and I didn't know that was going to be the last time I saw him? Why did, I allow my husband to pay the mortgage on the house and he never paid it? So it's that whole guilt, would've, could've, and should've. And so when people are feeling guilty, there's work that needs to be done. Taking responsibility for the guilt, also forgiveness of the other person, and also the biggest thing is self-forgiveness. So we can make reparations if possible. We can also seek forgiveness from other people, and then we can seek, again, self-forgiveness from the guilt, because it is the guilt of, I should have done it that way. Why didn't I do it that way? I should have been more astute to what was going on with my dad. He was telling me that he was feeling bad and I never took him to the hospital and he had a stroke. So it's the guilt. Then you have regret. Regret, tends to happen. As you can see, it's associated with feelings of sadness and repenting or being disappointed over something that has happened or been done. So I regret the fact that I wasn't there. I regret the fact that, I didn't make it, to hospice to see him that last time because I was traveling. So guilt and regret tends to be very, very difficult emotions to overcome. And, and so it's really important to walk through the grief journey, allow people to associate the emotions that's aligned with that loss. So if it is a death loss, what are some of the feelings and the emotion that align with that? Anger, disappointment, loss, confusion. So allowing people to align their emotions with that particular loss, not ignoring emotions of guilt and regret, helping people go beyond those feelings, allowing them to talk about it. So one of the things that I do with a lot of my clients is I allow them to journal. I also allow them to draw pictures. I allow them to paint. I allow them to do a variety of things, because if that is their way of expressing how they're feeling and what they're going through, then that's a step in a good direction, or I would say right direction, but a good direction. Allowing, really, really honing in and telling the person to be kind and patient with themselves. And because the guilt and regret is the low-hanging fruit, allow them to, really encourage them, be kind with yourself, be patient with yourself. Really, those are some of the things that tends to be very, very devastating, very challenging, very difficult. When people find that their emotion is regret, working through it, accepting, what has taken place, and really being determined to learn how to live, to learn how to grow and learn from that particular experience. So guilt and regret tends to be the two most difficult and challenging emotions, because you can't go back. You can't go back. So what are some warning signs for people? So if you're working with clients or somebody in your church, what are some warning signs? These are not all the warning signs, but these are some warning signs. So some warning signs, you may notice that the person is withdrawing, not participating in anything anymore. And right now, I know that some, churches are not conjugating together right now. But think about it. Even if you was having a Zoom call, they're not on the Zoom call anymore. And you know that sister such and such was the first one on the line. So, withdrawing, not being interested in some of the regular activities. You know that she was always bowling and she's no longer bowling anymore. She's no longer baking those good cakes anymore. So no interest in the regular things that he or she used to do. Loss of capacity to love. I'm just not going to love anybody anymore. Every person that I fall in love with or want to love, they die, they leave, things happen. Physical distress, going back to the anxiety, the depression, somatic things that may be going on, headaches, not being able to eat, preoccupied with the image of the person. Going back to guilt, is another thing. What I could have done, what I should have done. Hostile, becoming more hostile. But that's not him. He's never like that. He's definitely more mild-mannered. So that is unlike him. So these are signs, that something could be going on. Withdrawing, again, as I said, no interest in regular activities. That all lines together. Just having hopelessness, nothing good ever happens to me. When I was just starting to have a relationship with my dad, he passed away, feeling helpless. I just don't feel in control of anything anymore. And that's the other thing. People try to control things, and then people just not having a will to live. So these are the pretty much the last things that, I'm going to share. If people can stay on the line a little bit longer, maybe extra 10 minutes or so, so that, I'll spend a little bit of time answering questions. And if you have to get off of the line at 5, you can certainly do that as well. So how do we help others through grief? Assure the person, make sure that you let them know that what they're experiencing is normal. It's normal. It's a normal process. At the beginning, I said that it was a natural and normal reaction to loss. Grief is a natural and normal reaction to loss. Allow them to cry if they want to cry. That's okay. Let them cry. As I said before, I just put the tissue on a chair. When I was doing face-to-face, I'll put it on the chair or put it on the floor right by their foot. I don't give them a tissue. They know when they need to take a tissue or a Kleenex. I just don't do it. Sometimes they just let the snot and all the tears roll down. Be there. Your presence is very good. If you know somebody who's experienced a loss and, and it's a friend, family member, coworker, whatever, initiate something to do. Because we would say, and this is what my colleague used to say, we know what to do. Sometimes we wait for people to tell us what to do, or we wait for people to ask for help. So if a person have passed away and they're, and they died, that people have so many different people in their household. So my colleague would say, she would say, well, they need toilet paper. They need toothpaste. Just pick up some. You just went to Costco. Just pick up a few extra things for them. Sometimes we don't always have to ask. We can just initiate. Listen attentively, not making judgment, not giving those quick answers or avoiding those quick cliches. As I was saying, things that people do. Just be silent. Just be silent. Your presence sometimes is enough. Encourage them to express their feelings. What are you feeling right now? What would you like to say right now? And give that moment of silence. You can sit there for a minute or two, just because people are trying to collect what they're experiencing. They're trying to collect their emotions. And sometimes, okay, that's enough. It was like 2 seconds and now we're talking again. So allow people to just sit with their feelings and sit with their emotions and give them a chance to express them. Anger may be a part of the grief. So allow anger to be a part of the grief. As I said, we don't always like to deal with anger. We feel like anger is so bad. Do not always ask questions about the loss. I try to stay away from asking so many, well, what happened? How did you lose your house? What are you dealing with? Because people tend to be nosy. They want to know everything. Don't ask a lot of questions. I guarantee you, if you work with a person or you're there sitting with the person or you're walking the journey with that person, they will tell you what happened. That they will get to that. I just kind of let my clients just go and kind of do what it is that they need to do to process that. Offer opportunities for them to talk and remember. So there may be things that you can do in your church or as a clinician to give them those opportunities to reflect, to talk and remember, especially, you know, the person who's died. Allow people to grieve as long as they need to at their own pace. Sometimes we want to fix it. We want it to be okay. We rush the process. Help them find support. So always have resources that's readily available. If you're not a clinician yourself, and you know, and you have people in your congregation that's grieving, make sure you have a nice list of resources, and not just refer them, but if you know of like therapists, you know, personally, link them to the therapist. You know, do a warm handoff, because most of the time when you give them resources, a lot of times they don't exercise it or they don't follow up on them. So a warm handoff would be good. Post-death syndrome, definitely be aware of suicidal ideations and homicide, because they might say, you know what, I just rather die. I don't want to live anymore. You know, I'm angry, you know, all of these things. So we definitely need to be aware of those particular things as well. Some thoughts about how we can help people if grief is so stigmatized. And so the last couple things is normalize grief and loss. It's normal. Just normalize it. It could just be a conversation. Just make it normal. It's nothing spooky, nothing that needs a diagnosis. It's just normalized that it is normal. It's a normal process. Do not judge or condemn others when they are grieving, no matter the loss, the negativity, the condemnation. Discuss grief and loss. Don't change the subject. Don't say, well, okay, well, how is the weather today? You know, what are you going to do when you leave from here? Discuss it. Be comfortable with it. Be okay with it. Validate feelings. Let grief be what it is. As you can see, it's not a mental illness. It's definitely not a mental illness. Don't rush it or avoid it. Do not assume that people should think, feel, or act in a certain way. Don't think and feel that just because you experience your grief or your loss in a certain way, that person should also experience it in that way. People do not experience their grief and loss the same. And embrace grief as a common experience. It's a common experience. It's a result of loss. So I'm not going to go through these. These actually talk about some services. Three different ways that people can get what they need. First of all, grief coaching is a way, grief counseling is a way, and grief therapy is a way. So there's 3 different ways that people can get services and get support. So definitely think about, you know, people in your congregation, think about what they may need. Have a conversation, have a dialogue. It doesn't have to be formalized. It can be an informal conversation, you know, just to check in. You know, one of the things that I do, I like to check in. You know, I'm checking in with you. So these are a couple things that, you know, and I'm sorry, you know, I didn't go over this. Helping yourself through grief. Accept your own grief. I know a lot of us are grieving a lot of different things in our lives right now. Accept your own feeling, own your truth. You know, I'm angry right now of all the things that are happening. I feel lost. I feel confused. Own it. Own it. It's yours. When I say own it, meaning that, you know, no one can deny you your own reality. It is your reality. Learn about grief. Find an outlet. If it's talking, walking, journaling, painting a picture, drawing, whatever it is, find creative ways of expressing, you know, what you're experiencing. Focus on the grief. You know, now I'm sitting with it, but now I'm going to pull back just a little bit so that you don't get fixated in it. You know, think about it, focus on it a little bit. Like when my dad died, I'll focus on just losing him, but then I'll pull out of it. I'll pull back from it. You know, I'll go and visit it maybe another time. But I focus on just the memories and the different things that we had together. And then I'll pull back. Care for your whole being, body, soul, and spirit. We're whole beings, so it's important to care for all of that. Draw on your own spirituality, draw on your own resources is very, very important. Provide gentle self-care for yourself when grief is fresh. Be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself. And we tend to be kind and compassionate to other people, but sometimes we're not gentle, we're not kind to ourselves. acknowledge where you're at in your own life. Well, this is where I'm at today, because today, you know what, I'm not even feeling good. Today I'm angry. Today I'm experiencing something that I never thought that I would experience in my life. Be kind, be gentle, acknowledge where you're at. Seek support from other people, accept it. Sometimes we become so prideful. I can make it on my own. I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody. Sometimes we just need someone tangible who can kind of hold the space for us, who can walk the journey with us, manage our stress, embrace the good memories that we may have had with that person, focus on those memories, the good things that you did, maybe the good things that that person said. Sometimes we have to search for meaning in all of this, and it helps us to grow and develop into the persons that we are, have fun, relax, and also have hope. So these are just some few things that we definitely can do. So parting words for the supporter. If you are supporting people who are going through grief and loss, Judith Graham said, we cannot give what we do not have. Self-care is the foundation for caring about other people. Think about when you've been on a plane and they said, you know, you put the mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. It's the same thing in this work. It becomes overwhelming at times. It becomes very challenging at times. And so making sure that you take care of yourself first. So these are just some things when working with individuals who are grieving. Consider this, the pathways to self-care. Consider how you replenish your body, your heart, your spirit. How do you get your emotional cup filled? Who fills your cup? What are your sources of meaningful support? Is it family, friends, co-workers? What are your sources of meaningful support? Stay connected to meaning. What brings you joy as a helper? What brings you joy in doing this work? What satisfaction do you get out of this? How do you increase your self-awareness, being more reflective in your practice? And so one of the things that I do for myself, and I'm having conversations sometimes with myself, what came up for me when I was working with this client? What could I have done differently? What could I have said differently? So I do a lot of self-awareness. I do a lot of reflection because I also want to make sure that I'm staying in tune and in touch with myself. And the last thing is just be kind. Think about ways in which you're kind and compassionate to yourself. So these are just some self-care. Treat your body right, get exercise, eat right, take breaks, laugh. And like I was laughing at the beginning, it's okay to laugh. It's humor is good. It's okay. Prioritize, try not to be stressed out. Be more assertive. Tell people what you can and cannot do. Set boundaries. These are just some things that you can do for yourself. And I'm going to end this with a reading because I know some of you have to go and some people have already gotten off. It's by B. Mitchell and it's called Okay. Do you have some time? I need to talk. I need someone to listen to me, okay? Wait a minute. I didn't ask for advice. Please, I only asked if you would listen to me. I didn't ask you to explain or modify my feelings. I didn't ask you to direct or correct my feelings. If I'm told I shouldn't have my feelings just as I do, it hurts me. They're mine and nobody else's, my feelings. When I need you to listen to me, I'm not asking you to fix my problem, only to listen to me, okay? Yes, I pray and I speak to God. I also need the caring, the warmth, the energy of another human being. God is not enough. I need other people. At times, I need someone just to listen, to be a soundboard. Then I can hear myself think. I start understanding myself better. It's amazing. If you need me to listen to you, I'll be happy to do that. But each of us in our own time, okay? So I wanted to share that with you. It's called Okay with a question mark, and it's by B. Mitchell. And so the last thing is what Dr. Wolfelt says. He says, grief is a normal and necessary process that is fundamentally a journey of the heart and soul. And so this is just my contact information, some references. And then this is the last slide for the the National Black Catholic Congress. All righty, so that ends our presentation for today. Again, I have to say my apologies for getting started late and also for you not seeing the first half of it. So Kim, if there are a couple people that's still on and they have some questions, I'll take some questions.
Sure. Mary McCluskey has a question for you. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. Just a question about the guilt and regret slide. Guilt and shame, I think, are often can be confused, and I recently learned the difference between the two. And I'm wondering if shame, you know, like for example, I'm thinking of someone driving drunk who may have been the cause of an accident that kills family members, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in that case, they are guilty of, right? They're grieving the loss of their family members that died in the car accident, but they are also guilty of unintentionally participating in the death. So I'm just wondering, is shame, and then shame, of course, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, is guilt or shame more common, or can the two sometimes be mixed together?
Sometimes, Mary, the two can be mixed together. Sometimes the two can be mixed together because the guilt is something that a person did wrong or something they felt that they did wrong. So the shame could be, say for instance, like the mom that I was telling you about, whose daughter took her own life. So that could be part of the shame for her, because she's experiencing that loss and being shamed because maybe I could have done something different, or being shamed due to the fact that this is a shameful experience. Because who goes through this? Who really deals with this? Who has lost a loved one or a person to suicide? And so sometimes they could go hand in hand, but then also the shame is also associated with that, especially if there are loved ones who are left behind. So like when I worked in HIV, a lot of family members felt a lot of shame. And that's why that disenfranchised grief was, part of that, because they were shameful for what their loved one had done. So it could be the person who's committing the act, and it also could be the person who is left with feeling, I guess, the fallout of that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
And we also had another question, and I think the gentleman had to leave, but it was a good question about with the COVID restrictions and not being able to reach out physically. What are your suggestions for supporting people through grief?
So one of the things that I think is really helpful is that, because don't ask Lisa, because I'm having some challengers over here with this technology. But anyway, if you know people are struggling, if you know people are having a difficult time, one of the things that I try to do, and I'm very mindful of, is I try to call people. Now we have technology. We can Zoom, we can Google Meet, we can do Adobe Connect, we can do a variety of things. We can do free conference call. They have video conferencing. So if we know, we can be proactive. If we know people are struggling and we know people are really dealing with a lot of things in their life, it can be up to us, or we can put the ownership on us to just reach out to people. I know that I see clients now virtually, and actually, to be honest, some of my clients prefer to do virtual. I know it's not the touchy-feely that we want, but at least I can see you face to face. So I would say the way to support people, if you know people are struggling and dealing with some loss in their life, sometimes we need to take it upon ourselves to be proactive in reaching out to them and just making sure that our presence is there.
Very good. And I think that was the last question we had.
So we didn't have that many. All righty. I think people probably wrote things in the chat box. Any other questions? Do people have any other questions they want to ask before we in. I know some people got off.
Let me unmute.
And I didn't realize when I put it on share, my husband's laptop is confusing. And so I didn't realize when I put it on share that the thing was at the bottom. So I didn't realize.
Oh, yeah.
His laptop is different from mine.
Well, and I think you can change it in your view options too, but yeah, it's difficult to get that. I don't see any other questions coming in. Oh.
So if I will say, if people want to reach out, because I still see people are still on. Let me see, let me go back.
Okay, I gave everyone the option to unmute themselves now.
Okay, okay.
If they'd like to.
Okay. So if people want to reach out individually, if people want to email me and call me, you feel free to do so. I can talk to you offline if you don't want to share anything in the webinar. All right, I still see people on, so I'll stay on, Kim, maybe a couple more minutes.
Okay. And all of your resources that you have up, we'll post those. And we have several people ask for the PowerPoint presentation too.
Okay, all right.
You can post everything up on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, it looks like you have a lot of positive responses in the chat box, though.
Well, I'm sure I got some negative.
No, you did not.
I'm just like, okay, you know, this. I mean, it's just been a day. I'm like, okay, but you know what? It happens, and I can laugh at myself.
Right.
Lisa?
Yes.
This is Joni. I just want to say that the presentation was excellent. I work in parish ministry here in the Detroit area, and what I'm learning and discovering is that so many individuals, especially our seniors, are struggling with grief because of not being able to have the funeral that they want for their loved one. And so I spoke to one individual today. Her husband died from a nursing home. And she used the word regret. She was regretting that she had placed him in the nursing home. So I really like the fact that, you know, I just allowed her to talk.
Mm-hmm.
But what suggestions do you have for those of us in parish ministry who are dealing with people with loss and not being able to sort of celebrate the homecoming that they're used to?
So one of the things, Joni, that I would say, and one of the things that my husband's job is doing, because my husband is a hospice chaplain. So one of the things they're doing is a virtual remembrance. And so actually my overseer, his mom passed away in the midst of COVID. They did a virtual service. And so think about maybe doing a virtual memorial or a virtual remembrance service, and you can do it virtually. And so, and Joni, it may be other people that's in your parish that may have experienced some loss. So one of the things that my husband's job is doing is that they're going to do it virtually, and then they're going to call people names out. They're going to have somebody do a prayer. I don't know if they're gonna have somebody singing though, because I don't know about that. But anyway, they just, it's gonna be as if you were in person. So maybe for her and other people, maybe have a virtual service where they can, you know, they can kind of do some closure. And also, if you can, maybe people don't want to do candles, but maybe tell them that they can bring something that is I guess a remembrance or a token or something that helps them remember their loved ones. So say, for instance, if her husband loved, I'll say, I don't know, books. I'll just use books. Maybe his favorite book, you know, and that could be something to help remember them. So you could do something virtually.
Excellent, excellent. I'll pass that on to our pastor, because I know this was her emotion, but it's the feeling of so many others. Thank you, Lisa. You're excellent.
Yeah, so you know, if you want to reach out, Joni, if you want me to share with you, I think my husband's having their program. I think next week sometime. So
okay.
You know, after they have theirs, I can, if you shoot me an email so that I can remember, then I can share with you what they did, and you may want to kind of do something along the same line.
Okay, I love that. And I use the email address, this 4KS.
4KCAND right here on the screen. Can you see it on the screen?
Yes, I can. I'm writing it down right now.
Yep. That's why I left it up for people if they wanted to reach out to me. But definitely, you can send me an email and I can share that with you. So what you could do is a reading at the beginning, kind of like what I did. People can maybe talk a little bit. It don't have to be long, but it is it's opportunity, and it's a way to remember those who have gone on and they couldn't really have a service.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Joni.